about whether they would support this legislation if it does pass Congress?
The new administration has indicated during the campaign that they are entertaining changes with respect to the Cuban policy. We've not had specific discussion about this bill, however.
Senator Dorgan, do you think you have the votes to pass the bill and overcome a possible filibuster?
Let me just say it for myself, or perhaps Senator Dodd and Senator Enzi wish to answer. I think that we've finally reached a new watermark here on this issue. I think there is sufficient votes in both the House and the Senate on a bill like this to finally get it passed and get it to the President for signature. You know, it's been a long time. Senator Enzi described the process. Senator Dodd's been in it for a long, long time. But at some point, this is a policy that is no longer justifiable. When something doesn't work for 50 years, 47 years, you know, clear-headed thinking has to say, you know what, it's time to change it. And that's what we aim to do.
So, Senator, you think you have the votes on the floor, but what about in committee? And has Senator Reid said anything? Is he going to, you know, put this on the floor? I mean, there's a lot of stuff to put on, and he hasn't been really hot on this issue.
I think we'll have the votes in the Congress to move it from the committee to the floor to the President. I really believe that I really believe we have the votes wherever we decide to do this and however we decide to do it. Oh, the timing is not something we've not addressed at this point. Timing in the United States Congress is not an art or a science.
I would like to ask, I'm coming from France, a country which opposes embargo, so I would like to ask the three senators. Senators, do you think that at the next summit of Americas in Trinidad, America should start its new policy versus towards the end of the embargo against Cuba?
I can't speak for the president.
Well, yeah. I mean, go ahead, Chris.
There's not, in my view, the views for a total lifting of the embargo in the country. Others have their separate views on this, and that is, I think, a proposition which would not enjoy the kind of support that I think that lifting the travel restrictions. This may have been said before I walked in. What an irony it is. Tonight, I can go out to Dulles Airport, get on a plane, and I can fly to Iran, I can fly to North Korea, I can fly to Syria, Libya. Now, they may not let me in, but my country doesn't prevent me from going. The only country in the world which my country doesn't allow me to go to an airport and go anywhere is to Cuba, the only country in the world. This country 90 miles off my shore. It seems to me that's a fundamental flaw in this whole approach. So one step at a time, I think, is the right way that Senator Dorgan and others, Senator Enzi, are approaching this. The travel restriction is an issue that I think people can understand and understand the importance of it. Families being able to be together. And so I can't speak for others on how the embargo would be treated, but my sense of it is at this point, that's a step too far at this juncture. But I think the travel restrictions are exactly what Byron Dorgan has described. I think many people have come to the conclusion, including many Cuban Americans who feel as passionately as they do about this issue, and understandably so, that they feel very strongly that this generation particularly would like the opportunity to be with family members. And our experience has been, the one thing that totalitarianism can't stand is light, is information, is communication. That's what travel offers, that opening up doors, creating the light, creating the communication. Totalitarian, dictatorial regimes can't tolerate that. And I think that's one of the best moves we could make at this juncture, not only on behalf of the people who seek this, but for those who truly seek a change in Cuba. This may be the best step we could make to create that change.
Way the back, yes.
Those who oppose this move, like Senator Mel Martinez, say sending tourists to Cuba merely enriches the communist regime. So how would this economically benefit the people of Cuba?
Well, I happen to think it undermines the communist regime to have other voices joining the Cuban people. You know, the Cuban people certainly have heard the voice of the Castro brothers for many, many decades. Having the opportunity to hear the voices of American tourists, I think, undermines the Castro regime. There's no interest in this panel or anyone that I know of that co-sponsors this legislation that would ever want to reward a Castro government. In fact, we want to do just the opposite. we want to begin chipping away at the foundation for that government and see if we can bring freedom to the people of Cuba. We believe this would do that more quickly.
Senator, what sort of gestures would you expect from the Cuban regime in response to this olive branch?
What kind of what?
What kind of gestures would you expect from the Cuban government in response to this olive branch?
Well, the Cuban. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, this isn't the first time we brought this up, and unfortunately, the response from the Cuban government is usually something drastically anti-human rights. And that creates an ire in this country that kind of defeats any legislation that we're doing, and I think it's intentional on the part of Castro. So, and the unilateral is one of the key words on this. I think we're the only country that can't have our citizens travel to Cuba. That doesn't really impose any restrictions on them. It only imposes restrictions on our people and their ability to go down there and make a difference.
I think, let me just make a point. I think it's much the same point. The Cuban government plays no role in decisions about what kind of restrictions exist for Americans who travel. This restriction is absurd, and it's been there too long, and we need to, as a country, decide that a better policy is at this point ready, and we believe the votes exist in Congress to change this policy.
Last question. What is your next step on the travel restrictions? And maybe President Stallman can join in on this, in that Secretary Geithner has issued a memo that he's basically holding fast on the existing policy on trade restrictions for agricultural goods and medicines to Cuba. What is your next step, since it's not addressed directly in this bill?
Well, I've had a very long discussion with the Treasury Department. As you know, consultation works both ways, not one way. And the fact is, the Treasury Department is required to follow the law with respect to the current law, and we intend to change the law with respect to travel. But I think with respect to the general licensing provision, the discussions I've had with the Treasury Department suggest that they understand that that which was put in writing does not comport with what exists in law. I expect some changes there.
You mentioned multilateralism. It is any initiative to bring the discussion into the OIS regarding Cuba?
That's an administration. I don't quite understand your question. I'm sorry.
You mentioned multilateralism initiative. Try to bring all the people together, all the countries in the region. There is any initiative to bring the discussion on Cuba to the OIS?
That would be part of the administration's judgments about how they relate to that organization and the role this issue would play in that organization, and generally the larger embargo questions with respect to Cuba.
Senator Enzi, you said something very true about reactions from the Cuban government. And the president is expected to relax restrictions on Cuban-American travel. But the problem I see there, and the problem I see with allowing all Americans to travel, is the Cubans then pick and choose who's allowed to enter. I mean, you think tourism, and you argue that tourism is a great thing to liberalize Cuba, but they're going to be very selective in granting visas. So isn't that going to be self-defeating here about, opening up Cuba, but then, it may not really occur because they're going to have a handle, as you say, they don't want over-liberalization.
I don't think there's any problem to it at all. I mean, we have the bicyclist that's been down there. They're not going to keep an 80-year-old bicyclist out of there, but she had contact with the people there. The group from Wyoming that's done an exchange down there that's now prohibited from doing any exchanges down there have had a very positive effect on it. The lady that provided free Bibles down there had a great effect. Well, I don't think every American will be able to get in there, but I think a great many of them will be able to get in there, and it'll be a new mission for the country. We haven't had any success at getting other countries to join in any kind of an embargo, whether it's travel or anything else. So we need to kind of take the other approach and allow some of our people to go down there and make a difference.
So that brings a decent point about that. I mean, a lot of tourists go to Cuba from democracies. I mean, from Italy, from countries in Latin America, or from the neighbors to the north. I mean, it's not like there aren't people from outside Cuba going to Cuba every day. And that's, as you guys know, that hasn't changed anything. what's special about this stamp of Americans that's going to make a difference in, say,
Well, it's a whole lot
Canadians,
closer.
Italians,
I know you took geography. It's a whole lot closer to Cuba from the United States than it is Canada or Europe. And I think you make the point that we're making this morning. If they all can travel to Cuba, why should the American citizen not have the same travel rights? Thank you very much.
Doesn't the defunding run out at the end of the fiscal year? So the provision to defund enforcement expires.
They made a mistake.
Good job.
Yes. General license.
¿Por qué no lo paramos acá y lo hacemos de una vez todos allá? Que se para acá.
I like working with them too. Treasury is actually
No, claro, claro que no hay nada más. Deje que vengan todos los camarógrafos.